Okay, let's just dive right into this. I want you to go ahead and dim the lights, maybe let your breathing slow down a bit, and just imagine stepping into the echoing, icy corridors of a medieval castle. You can picture the torches flickering along the walls, right? And you can actually hear the wind sneaking through those heavy wooden doors. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to strip away all that Hollywood fantasy and discover how people actually survived the freezing, totally unforgiving reality of a medieval winter night.
First things first, we really need to dispel this romantic myth of castles. You know, it's so easy to picture a cozy, tapestry-lined room with a roaring fire. But the blunt, freezing reality? Yeah, it was entirely different. Chroniclers from the time treated it as almost totally normal to wake up and discover your wash basin had completely frozen solid by dawn. Just imagine waking up with delicate, freezing lace frost tracing the inside walls of your own bedroom, or literally having icicles hanging from your bed curtains. Honestly, the biggest enemy in a castle wasn't some rival knight, it was the cold.
Historians are always describing castles as these marvels of defense. And they were. But the exact same architecture that made them impenetrable to armies, well, it made them absolutely miserable for sleeping. Those thick, uninsulated stone walls didn't just resist the warmth, they swallowed it whole. They essentially acted like a giant stone refrigerator. As soon as the sun dropped, the inside temperature just plummeted, trapping all that cold air inside. You would literally see your breath forming clouds in front of your face while you were indoors.
The environment itself was pretty much weaponized against comfort. A lot of castles were strategically built on these wind-swept hills, which sure, is brilliant for spotting invaders, but an absolute curse for getting any sleep. The wind just scoured every single surface, forcing icy drafts through unglazed windows that, more often than not, were just covered by wooden shutters or maybe some oiled cloth. Add to that the thick, damp stone constantly radiating this deep, bone-chilling cold, and yeah, you've got an environment designed by nature and architecture to be relentlessly hostile.
So before retreating to those icy bedrooms, everyone gathered down in the Great Hall. This was really the beating heart of the castle, kind of a temporary oasis of warmth. With a massive central hearth roaring away, it was loud, it was smoky, and it was incredibly live. But here's a totally fascinating fact for you. Feasting in the winter? It was actually a strategic survival tactic. Nobles purposefully scheduled their largest gatherings during the bitter months because the combined body heat of hundreds of guests, all packed close together, helped turn that great hall into something at least approaching cozy.
But there was a catch, and it comes down to the cruel physics of the medieval fireplace. The heat only traveled a few feet from the flames. If you had high rank, you claimed a seat right near the hearth, basking in that golden glow. But if you were seated further away, or say you were a servant working the edges of the room, you were absolutely shivering. The fire basically created this tiny little bubble of tolerable heat, while the rest of that vast, smoke-stained space remained an absolute icebox.
As the night wore on, a very real timeline of psychological dread started to unfold. When the feast finally ended, the golden firelight faded down to embers. And then came the transition, the dreaded walk from the Great Hall up to your bedchamber. Leaving that temporary warmth to step into a narrow, drafty stone passage, it was a literal physical shock to the body. The warmth drained out of your bones instantly. Every torch put out, every single step up that spiral staircase was just a shivering ordeal into the frigid silence of the night.
Which brings us to part 1, the microclimate cocoon. This is all about how they engineered warmth inside what was basically a stone tomb.
Because once you were inside that icy stone room, survival really required some serious ingenuity. You see, a medieval bed wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a meticulously engineered survival machine. So here's how they built this fortress of sleep. Step 1, the bed frame was raised high off the ground. That's to escape the coldest layer of air, which, as we know, always sinks to the floor. Step 2, they laid down a thick mattress to insulate against the chill radiating from beneath. And step 3, and this is absolutely the crucial point, they drew heavy canopy curtains entirely around the bed. And no, this wasn't really for privacy. It was designed to trap the sleeper's breath and body heat inside, raising the temperature in that small, sealed-off space just enough to keep them alive.
Now, the foundation of this fortress really depended on your status. For the nobility, you're looking at the luxurious feather bed. Think of a huge sack stuffed thick with goose or duck down. It cradled you in warmth, though honestly it could sometimes be so suffocatingly hot you'd actually wake up drenched in sweat. But for the vast majority, including soldiers and peasants, the reality was a straw tick. Sure, they were cheap and they kept you off the cold floor, but they flattened out super quickly, poked your skin all night, and, gross as it is, frequently harbored fleas and mice.
Right on top of that mattress came what we can call the textile sandwich. Linen sheets formed the base layer, mostly to cool and breathe, and that was followed by thick, incredibly heavy wool blankets. Seriously, they weighed so much they were often compared to the weight of a hound. Then, for the wealthy, dense furs like Arctic fox or sable topped the whole shebang off to trap all that heat. Sleepers literally buried themselves under so much heavy fabric that just turning over in the middle of the night required a monumental physical effort.
And those layers, they didn't stop at the blankets. Medieval folks went to sleep nearly as bundled up as they were during the daytime. They wore these long, loose linen nightshirts, and most importantly, a snug-fitting nightcap or coif tied right under the chin. They totally understood that a massive amount of body heat escapes through an uncovered head. Basically, going to sleep without a nightcap in a freezing castle was like a knight going into battle without his helmet. You were just dangerously exposed.
They also developed these really delicate sensory bedtime rituals just to preheat their bodies and their beds. Servants would sweep brass warming pans filled with hot coals right over the sheets, which, by the way, was a super risky move that sometimes scorched the linens or even started full-on fires. People would also drink hot spiced wine, ale, or hot mead to spread warmth through their chest from the inside out. And they'd even tuck stones, heated by the hearth and wrapped in cloth, right down by their feet. It was this entire choreography of survival tools.
Moving on to part 2, communal heat. This is where we look at survival by biological radiators.
See, even with the heavy curtains and the hot stones, the absolute most reliable source of heat available was biological. When the environment is literally out to freeze you, other living bodies become walking, breathing radiators. If you slept alone in a vast stone chamber, your body heat simply bled out into the walls. But sleeping beside others, that meant warmth multiplied. Sharing a bed with squires, servants, or family members was considered an absolute privilege of warmth. Over in monasteries and barracks, monks and soldiers slept shoulder to shoulder in these long dormitories. Sure, the crowded air got pretty thick and musky, but that collective body heat was the ultimate shield against the creeping frost. When survival is at stake, privacy kind of goes out the window.
And this brings us to the literal reality behind the phrase three-dog night. You might have heard that before, right? Well, medieval people frequently shared their beds with animals. Massive, incredibly loyal hounds curled up at a master's feet acted as living, breathing heaters. 1 dog meant manageable cold, 2 meant a serious chill. 3 dogs, that meant the night was so intensely bitter that you literally needed to stack every single possible source of biological heat into that bed just to keep your toes from getting frostbite.
Which actually brings us to a rather massive historical irony. Look at this comparison. The nobles, with all their immense wealth, slept in these cavernous stone boxes that just swallowed heat, leaving them shivering despite all their fancy furs. Meanwhile, peasants who were huddled in tiny timber and daub cottages around a single central hearth often experienced a significantly warmer night's sleep. That small space trapped the fire's heat perfectly, and the closeness of the family, plus their livestock indoors, kept the air far, far more tolerable than the drafty keep of a lord. Crazy, right?
We also definitely can't ignore the scent of medieval sleep. Think about this dense sensory stew you'd be breathing in. Because they lacked really efficient chimneys, acrid wood smoke just clung to everything. The walls, the bedding, your hair. The air was heavy with the musty odor of damp wool, lanolin, and the earthy decay of the straw rushes covering that cold floor. To try and combat this, they would scatter crushed rosemary and lavender around, trying to mask the scent of dampness and sweat. To breathe in a medieval bedroom was essentially to inhale the very struggle for survival.
Because of all this cold, the medieval biological clock completely adapted, resulting in what we call a segmented sleep rhythm. They definitely didn't sleep a straight 8 hours like we try to do today. They had a first sleep that started after dusk, but right around midnight they'd wake up. Why? Well, someone had to get out of bed, stumble across the icy floors, and tend to the dying fire. Because if those embers died, the chamber became completely unbearable. After this wakeful period of stoking the hearth, they'd get back into bed for their second sleep and ride it out until the bitter morning.
Yet, despite the roaring fires, the piles of dogs, the thick curtains, and the countless layers of wool, the cold often won anyway. One English poet even used the metaphor of a bed without frost inside the hangings to describe an elusive, perfect level of comfort. The daily reality was that people frequently woke up to find their own breath had crystallized into a thin layer of rime on the inside of their bed curtains. The cold didn't just stay outdoors, it actively invaded, serving as a nightly reminder of just how cruel the environment could be.
So what does this all mean for us? The crucial point to take away is this. Sleeping in a medieval castle really wasn't about resting peacefully. It was about staging a nightly war against the environment.
The sheer ingenuity of these people, building microclimates, layering up textiles, sharing body heat, it's just astounding. So, as you lie in your centrally heated, totally draft-free room tonight, I want you to think about the effortless luxury of modern sleep. Could you have engineered your survival in a stone refrigerator? It's a fascinating question, and one that absolutely gives us a profound appreciation for the gritty resilience of the past.